'Tis I. Hey everyone, glad to see you back, glad to see you looking fresh. So, My Hero Academia is one of the biggest shows and manga series that Shonen Jump has ever had. But it is a show that has in recent years fallen off in popularity. And I kind of wanted to talk about why I think that has been the case. So, My Hero, if you don't know, is a show about Deku, a typical shonen protagonist where he starts out very weak but with big aspirations to be the greatest hero in the world. And the entire show and story wraps around him, his class of characters. There are 20 characters in his school class, and he aspires to be like All Might, who is currently the greatest hero ever. There's so many characters in this show, whether they are teachers, like I said, schoolmates, or professional heroes like All Might, and this world feels so lived in with the amount of characters and backstory and the way everything kind of works together. And it created a show that people fell in love with. To talk about why it kind of fell from grace, I think we have to start with how it came to be such a icon. So let's start back where it started. And the show came out in 2016. Now, of course, the manga came before it, but much like a lot of us here in the West, a lot of people don't read the comics that our favorite superhero movies are based on. And so a lot of people didn't read the manga that their favorite superhero anime was going to be based on. So it kind of all fit together. But anyways, the anime started in 2016. So 2016 was a pretty big hotspot for comic book media. The MCU had just entered its third phase with stuff like Captain America Civil War and Doctor Strange. The DC EU was trying to start firing all cylinders. We had Batman v Superman and the Suicide Squad. And we still were getting Fox X-Men movies. We had Deadpool and X-Men Apocalypse. There was no shortage in superhero media at the time. But we just wanted more. And lo and behold, the shonen genre basically was producing superhero stories since the 80s. Characters like Naruto and Goku, Luffy were all basically superheroes, but they weren't in a superhero show. So it wasn't like the same thing as watching a Batman or a Superman or a Spider-Man story, because they weren't actual superheroes, if that makes sense. So Shonen Jump finally has a property that is superhero based. And finally just taps into that feeling of like, well, they're basically superheroes anyway, so let's just go for it. In 2016, My Hero Academia comes on out and takes the anime world by storm. Out of seemingly nowhere, this show explodes in popularity. Everyone's talking about season 1. We're talking about how much they love Deku, and especially Bakugo as new characters. All Might is this great new heroic icon. Of course, there's relationships that show up with who Uraraka's gonna fall in love, and so much crazy stuff. Typical anime fandom. And season 2 comes out and it doesn't disappoint. Season 2 comes out and it's bigger than the first one. It's longer than the first one. It has the classic shonen tournament arc, which everybody loves, and My Hero does not disappoint with it. It's one of the best parts of the show. It puts a big spotlight on a big fan favorite of Todoroki, gives him a great backstory that we all can latch onto, starts giving more characterization to some of these other characters that were there in the first season, sure, but starts feeling them in more and giving them much more character for us to latch onto. And going forward from that, the hype of after season 2 was monumental. It was a huge deal. And then after that, that's when the first movie comes out. Like, that's a very quick turnaround from having only a year prior, 2 years before the movie came out, there was not that much hype around the show, to having a big movie released worldwide that I was lucky enough to see in theaters. It's right behind me, and I think the movie is very good. Season 3 is where a lot of people started to fall off. For me, it's an interesting thought because season 3 is my favorite season. It starts with more school stuff. They're going on a trip, and they in the woods, basically. And there's an attack from some villains, and it culminates that arc into one of the greatest, I think, anime fight scenes of all time, which is All Might versus All for One. And it's this huge climactic battle, an episode that I sometimes still go back to and rewatch whenever I'm feeling down. I need a little bit of pick-me-up. But then after that arc, there's another non-super big climactic arc, which is the school licensing exam, which I think is really good as well. It's just not as important feeling. And I think that's where a lot of people come from when they complain about how this show kind of doesn't strike a great balance. Because we have what feels like a world-ending event in the fight scene of All for One versus All Might, which isn't technically a world-ending event, but the way it's presented, it feels that way. It's that classic anime great guy versus great bad guy, and then just throw down, and whoever comes out on top is gonna shape the rest of the planet. And then we just we're doing school stuff again, which I really like that arc a lot. That's why season 3 is part of my favorite, is because I don't fall off the cliff that a lot of people do after that gigantic fight. But that's where the tipping point started to happen. Season 4 comes out with a lot less hype around it than season 3 did. It came with a lot of hype from the manga readers because they were very excited for the overhaul arc. They were hyping this up to be something pretty brutal, pretty unexpected, and that arc, the first arc of season 4, was pretty good. Even though I think they nerfed it a little bit from manga. I have not read the manga fully, so I don't know. But then again, the second half of the season has a lot to do with school stuff and the school festival, which I think is very lovely, but that's also muddled with a character called Gentle Criminal, which even I wasn't a huge fan of, so that left a bigger sour taste in people's mouths, because even if you liked the stuff with the school festival, you still had to deal with this other enemy that didn't really feel unimportant. And then season 5 comes out, and it deals with more school stuff. An arc that doesn't feel that important, but it introduces more characters from the other class. It's not Deku's class. Then deals with the super villain. So we have a My Villain Academia arc, which is pretty good. I don't think the show has necessarily gotten that bad going through all the seasons. It's definitely not at its peak. The day this video comes out is the day before I'm going to sit down and binge all of season 6. So I have no idea if season 6 is better or not. But what I do know is that season 6 was barely talked about. And that's a bit of a shame considering how much this show impacted me. Because this is the show that, opened my eyes to how much fun and entertaining anime can be. And so I will thank it for that, for always. And I will always enjoy it, even when it's not so good. But that's part of why the show kind of fell off, is just that, the hype around it kind of took a tumble. And a lot of my friends I even talked about don't even know that season 6 happened. But culturally, I think what took down My Hero more than its own shortcomings in its storytelling was the fact that superhero media got a little bit oversaturated. Over the years, Marvel has continued on, DC floundered, but there's other stuff, like The Boys and other stuff Amazon's doing. Plenty of superhero stuff to watch, that if you're interested. The other thing is that Shonen came out with 2 other huge shows that people just seem to latch on to more, and it's become a debate on which of those is becoming more popular, and that would be Jujutsu Kaisen, which is focused way in on more climactic battles and way cleaner animation, and something like Demon Slayer, which has compacted the shonen formula very tightly and presented a story that is familiar, but a lot of people are loving because it does everything that shonen shows do very well. So it's hard for something like My Hero to try to carve its way through that, where you have the shonen fans being very satisfied with stuff like Demon Slayer and Jujutsu Kaisen, and then you have the superhero fans being very satisfied with how Marvel was going, and smattering of DC and, The Boys and your Hellboys and stuff like that coming out. So it's been hard times to keep up the pace. So My Hero, after all this time, I think is an interesting case. Because let's say this show never reached that overwhelming hype that it did. It was just a moderate success, and it continued along the whole time the way it's been. I think people would still be like praising this show as, wow, this show is like really great still, and you should really watch it. But the fact that it went so lofty and became such a cultural phenomenon that even my friends who don't watch anime have heard me talk about My Hero and know some of the characters from it. It was a hard thing to miss for a while. And so something like that, falling from grace, is a lot harder to try to pick back up than something that was just very consistent, which unfortunately My Hero hasn't been. But I am looking forward to watching season 6 tomorrow, if you're watching this. If not, I will have already seen it, and I maybe will write about how I enjoyed it in the comments. I don't know. Remind me, or otherwise I'll forget. So, yeah. Have you seen My Hero Academia? What are your thoughts on it? Especially if you stuck with it, like me, into the later seasons. The movies, maybe? That might be why you stuck around, because the movies, animation have been really spot on, where some of the shows has fallen off. Hopefully season 6 is good. So I'll be excited for season 7. That'll about do it for me. Thank you so very much for watching, and as always, like this if you like this, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you at some point.